Thank you all for coming today. We're excited to see everyone here. I'm Nicole Miller, the Forest Futures Program Director for the Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation. On behalf of all of our staff, our CEO, Stacy Caldwell, and our board, I want to thank you for joining us for tonight's salon on preparing for the 2023 wildfire season and an introduction to the Tahoe Truckee COAD. We are recording this presentation, so I would like to remind everyone to please keep yourself muted. You can type questions into the chat throughout the duration of the event, and we will be monitoring the chat, and we will answer all questions for all of our presenters at the end of all of our presentations. Before we jump into the presentations, we'll give you an overview of who we are. So the Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation has been serving our community since 1998. We connect people and opportunities, generating resources to build a more caring, creative, and effective community. We pride ourselves in connecting donors to causes they love, supporting nonprofits through grants and training, and connecting community leaders to collaborate on strategy. With consistent strategy and leadership, we ensure that our grant making and the resources we attract to our region are aligned and effective. We are supported by an amazing board of directors, passionate about this region representing a range of industries, and all deeply embedded and engaged in the community. I want to recognize the board members that have joined us tonight. We thank you for your attendance and participation. And we'd also like to thank all of our amazing staff who are listed here, as well as our staff that are on the call tonight. I know we have Christina, who just spoke, and Therese Sachet, all on the call with us. Community foundations are place-based philanthropic organizations dedicated to improving the lives and environment of a particular area, and they play a key role in identifying and addressing the needs of their region and responding with resources and solutions. Beyond grant making and scholarships, TTCF has identified 3 critical issues unique to our community: family strengthening, workforce housing, and forest health. The Forest Futures Initiative specifically has grown from knowing that as a community, we must continue to do all we can to mitigate the risks of wildfire. Forest Futures is a bold, entrepreneurial, and strategic model for how community foundations across the country can take a lead role in confronting the local impacts of climate change. Our Forest Futures initiatives focuses on 3 areas of impact. The first area is protecting communities through reducing fuels, establishing fire breaks, and protecting key evacuation routes. The second area of impact is building a forest economy. In this area, we're strengthening rural economic resilience through funding for workforce development, infrastructure, and industry to utilize hazardous forest waste. And the third impact area is accelerating market solutions, where we are hoping to scale and speed forest management by creating a model that can be replicated in other global mountain communities. We're deploying flexible and nimble capital to fill the needs and gaps for forest management in our region. This is just a quick overview of the Forest Futures impact to date. We've developed many strong on-the-ground relationships with our place-based partners. We've raised $5.66 million to date, have released $1.9 million through our phase 1 and phase 2 grant distributions. We also secured a $1.9 million CAL FIRE block grant, and of that, a little over $500,000 is being released to private property owners in our first round of the Truckee North Tahoe Forest Management Program. And we've supported 23 projects of our partners throughout the region to scale and speed forest management. This evening, we're discussing the forecast for the upcoming fire season and an introduction to the Tahoe Truckee COAD. We're excited to have Brent Wachter with the Forest Service, Bob Counts from CAL FIRE, and Anne Rarick from the COAD here with us tonight to lead the discussion. Before I introduce them, I just want to remind everyone to please keep yourself muted and to put your questions in the chat as they come to you, and we will monitor the chat and present all of the questions at the end of all of our presentations. Our first speaker tonight is going to be Brent Wachter, and Brent is currently a Predictive Service fire weather meteorologist for the U.S. Forest Service North Ops based in Redding. He arrived in Northern California 2 weeks prior to the wine country fires igniting in 2017. Prior to becoming a North Ops meteorologist, Brent served as a National Weather Service fire and incident meteorologist for 16 years and helped provide weather support during several fire incidents across the country, as well as helped Australia during a couple of their bad fire seasons. Bob Counts is the assistant chief for the NEU and Placer County Fire Department East Division. Chief Counts will oversee 3 field battalions and operations for the Northern and Eastern Placer County CAL FIRE jurisdictions and is a 29-year veteran of the fire service. He started his career with CAL FIRE in the Amador El Dorado unit as a firefighter 1 and promoted through the ranks as an engineer and fire captain, working in a variety of assignments, including the Cameron Park Fire Department Cooperative Agreement, the Camino Emergency Command 911 Center, and stations in Central and Northern El Dorado County. And our third speaker tonight is Anne Rarick, who is the Tahoe Truckee COAD, which is Community Organizations Active in Disaster. And she is the manager of that COAD for Connecting Point. She brings 10 years of nonprofit experience to this role with an emphasis on program development, social services, and anti-poverty work. She holds a master's in public health from University of Nevada, Reno, and a bachelor's in arts from Western Washington University. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our first speaker, Brent. Go ahead, Brent.
Okay, well, thank you. So Predictive Services, we do a lot of different types of forecast out of North Ops and Redding. And one of our big bread and butter products that we issue once a month at the beginning of the month is this significant fire potential outlook. And they always go out 4 months in advance. So you're never going to get one that's out several months in advance. But 4 months is certainly, I think, more than adequate. And really, when it comes to 3 and 4 months out, the accuracy sometimes is a little, is perhaps not as good. So this particular outlook runs for July through October of this year. And what's really interesting is that very few people have seen this outlook because I will be posting it at the beginning of July. And of course, we're not to July yet. So you are one of the first ones to get to see this outlook for Northern California. So we go forward. So when I do these outlook talks, I look at the fire season in 3 different blocks. I kind of break it up 3 different ways. There's the setup ingredients that go into whether a season is active or not. And those setup ingredients, sometimes drought, what was the winter snowfall. There's a lot of different ingredients that go into that setup conditions. And it's usually an accumulation of what have you done for me lately in terms of weather anomalies. And then the second part, I like to look at what is the future weather anomalies. What's the future temperature trends, precipitation trends, wind and lightning, which can all add and make up whether a season is active or not. And then lastly, I take a look at the first 2, the setup ingredients, the projected weather conditions, kind of mix it into a bowl, and I come up with the overall expectations. We can go to the next slide. We can go to the next slide.
Sorry.
So I'm just going to address a few of the setup and conditions. If you go to our website at North Ops, you will find a more complete presentation and write-up. I'm just going to address a few setup conditions that I think are very appropriate for the Greater Lake Tahoe area. And the first setup condition is the drought conditions. And so this particular panel shows a comparison of drought, the more recent conditions as of just a week ago in terms of drought, and in drought, what it was like in terms of drought a year ago around this time. And so that's what you see in here. The right image is the current image, and the left image is the drought a year ago. And you can see that there's a significant difference out there, and thanks in large part to the amount of snow that we received over the winter and the amount of precipitation we've had this spring. And so really for Northern California, you see there's no drought designation. All you see is the yellow abnormally dry, and it isn't for the Lake Tahoe area. So we're devoid of this so-called long-term drought, which is certainly an important factor when you start designing the outlooks going forward. We go to the next slide. This particular graphic is an interesting graphic. I've been showing it in presentations for the past few months. It's the relationship of the amount of moisture in the snowpack, which is the top bar graph, compared to the amount of acres that burn during a wildfire season since 2002. So you both, the top graph is moisture in the snowpack at April 1st, which is usually when it's peak moisture in the snowpack for California, since 2002. And then the bottom graphic is that acreage burned across Northern California. And the black lines represent the average lines for both metric. So I want to talk about that top graphic first. There have been, prior to this year, there have been only 6 years in which we have had above normal moisture in the snowpack on April 1st. And these are, again, these little bars that are above the black average line. You can see this year has been the highest amount since 2002. The bottom graphic, and so the bottom line is we want to look at where those above normal snowpack years line up with the acreage burned. And the highlighted yellow areas in the bottom graph represent the amount of acreage during those above normal snowpack years. And you see that all of the years but one, 2017, are below or well below the average, the 21-year average of about 550,000 acres for Northern California. So that's certainly a good sign. That one odd year, 2017, it was a year that had a lot of heat and it had quite a bit of lightning. So that's not a good combination when you start talking about heat and lightning. That can make for a little bigger season. But even though, you can see 2017, it's just above the average. So overall, that gives you a little bit of anecdotal information into learning, kind of thinking about what is the type of fire season we're going to see over the next few months or several months. So this is a good sign for Lake Tahoe, or at least Northern California in general, because of the abundant snowpack that we had. Let's go to the next slide. So the last setup ingredient that I'd like to talk about are these wild cards. And these wild cards are more localized conditions, but can certainly be impactful for communities that have these wild cards in place. Some of these wild cards can lead to extra flammability in the fuel bed, especially when conditions dry out, or they can mitigate flammability. They can reduce the spread potential of significant fire. And I will want to make mention that when I do these outlooks, they are designed for highlighting significant fire potential, not just fire potential, but significant fire potential. So what are these wild cards that I think could be fairly pertinent for the Lake Tahoe area? Well, one is there's still quite a bit of leftover mortality, death in the trees, and some of the shrubs from the previous successive years of significant drought that we had. So if we do dry out sufficiently, that could be a concern in those mid and upper elevations where we have a lot of mortality. And we certainly have that in the Tahoe Basin. Blowdown, we had a lot of atmospheric river events, those significant wind and precipitation events that we had during the winter, unusual amounts, and they had lots of wind with them. And so there are definitely areas out there that trees were blown down. This is a particular picture, in kind of the central part of your screen. I took it in Lassen National Park just a few weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, and you can see this is on the main highway there. You can see that there's a tree that's knocked down. Certainly that will be something that folks in the Tahoe Basin are probably going to see out there. And then this snow crush term. This is a picture I also took in Lassen National Park, and this is around 6,000 feet or so. And you see the manzanita shrub, it's been displaced. Lots of heavy snow loading, high density snow for an extended period of time that leads to this so-called snow crush effect, which is basically maneuvering the fuel bed into a little different orientation. It should act to provide more intense surface fire near the surface. And then lastly, another wild card, and certainly for the greater Tahoe Basin, it would be appropriate, is the recent burn footprints that we have out there. We've had a lot of acreage burn in the last 3 to 5 years. And that also kind of displaces the way the fuel bed would react if you had an ignition in it. We've taken a lot of canopy out, and that reduces the threat for spotting fire behavior and those long range of fire runs that we've seen in the last 5 years. So that's certainly a good thing because it helps protect certainly some communities. We had the Keldor fire to the west of the Tahoe Basin. That will serve as a protector for this year in terms of some of the greater Lake Tahoe area. So those are the wild cards. If we go to the next slide. So the next thing I want to talk about are the expected weather anomalies. And we'll go to the next slide. So I don't want to really geek out on you, but there are a few teleconnections. And what I mean by teleconnections is the way that the ocean, the surface of the ocean, and those anomalies across the surface of the ocean can change the way the atmosphere behaves in terms of the positioning of the jet stream and those high and low pressure systems that get driven by the jet stream. And there are two teleconnections in play for the next 4 months that I think are going to be the major players. There are other teleconnections out there across the globe that can impact our weather in Northern California, but I believe these two teleconnections will be the primary ones. That first graphic is an animation, a sea surface temperature anomaly animation for the past 90 days. And this box represents the area that describes El Nino or La Nina. And we can see here that the temperatures are above normal, and they've been rapidly becoming above normal over the last 4 months or so. If you recall, we had been in a La Nina the previous 3 years. So this is quite a profound change in which El Nino is now going to be front and center over the next several months. The other teleconnection that has been very impactful this past winter and spring and should be impactful over the next few months is this negative PDO or Pacific Decadal Oscillation. That is represented by the arc of cooler than normal water that we can see from this image along the western North American coast and the warmer water anomaly found over central and western portions of the North Pacific. This type of pattern helps to anchor low pressure systems like we've seen the past couple months. So it's certainly going to be a contributor as well. So let's go forward. So we have these official forecasts, and there's two types of forecasts here, or at least two forecasts from two different providers. There's our in-house predictive service forecast. That particular meteorologist resides in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And he looks at all the teleconnections that are going on across the globe. He's also looking at the past and where those teleconnections lined up to help predict the future. For example, using 1997 to predict your future going forward and what occurred then. That's an analog year that a lot of folks are looking at. So that's this top forecast. And you can see it's July, August, September, and October. And the top images are temperature anomalies, and the bottom images are precipitation anomalies. In terms of the red colors, that represents above normal anomalies. And you can see that our cool weather that we have been having, or relatively cool weather, is likely to transition, especially during the month of July, but more so August, September, and October. And when you start to put that many months in a row of expected above normal temperatures, that heat signature, that changes things a little bit, where folks might think, oh, we're not going to have a season at all. But when you got 3 months of heat projected, um, that could change things a little bit. The other bottom graphic is the precipitation anomaly. And really for July, it's looking at near to a little above normal, perhaps favoring eastern areas like we saw during June. And in August, you see that dashed green line. It's basically suggesting some moisture intrusions at times, probably some lightning, which if our fuels start to dry out, then could be problematic. And in September, you see that green dashed line, which kind of represents, again, some lightning intrusions are likely. And in October, you see that drier than normal conditions. So certainly when I start talking about the end result of what I'm thinking, this forecast will come into play. The bottom set of graphics come from the NOAA's Climate Prediction Center. These are 3-month forecasts, July, August, and September. And you see that above normal temperature signal showing up, which jives with the predictive service forecast. And then the white color basically represents uncertainty. Can't tell whether it's going to be above normal or below normal. And so near normal is probably the best forecast, but it does imply some uncertainty there for that period. One last thing that I'll note, notice all the brown coloring down in the southwest part of the US during July through September, matching up with the Climate Prediction Center forecast. That basically tells me, and a lot of people believe this to be true, higher confidence, is that the southwest monsoon, which tends to drive some of our lightning threat, especially up the Sierra, is expected to not be as robust this year. And that could change the flavor of the lightning that impacts Northern California. It's likely to be a little drier than what we observed last year. That was one of the saving graces for us, was those wetter storms that we ended up getting for an extended period of time, like for example, in late July and early August of last year. So let's go forward. So as a sum up for the expected weather anomalies, July should be a transition month between the warmer August anomalies that we are expected to see and the cooler and semi-moist June anomalies that we've already seen. So July is that transition month in the weather patterns. That's what I'm expecting. Likely lightning over the next few months is likely to come from different source regions. Certainly the monsoon pattern will certainly be in play at times, but as I mentioned, it's not expected to be as robust compared to recent years, and so I don't think it's going to spend as much duration over Northern California. The Pacific hurricane season, the Eastern Pacific hurricane season, is expected to be active this year because of El Nino, and that could lead to more of a tropical flavor to the storms. In recent past, some of our biggest lightning events, like mid-August of 2020, was a result of remnant tropical moisture. So that could lead to some more drier types of storm environments. And then lastly, these cutoff lows or orphan lows or weak low pressure systems, like we have been seeing the past month and a half, I would expect that to continue this summer, more so in July than in August, but it's something that I think will also lead to lightning. And then lastly, the wind patterns are expected to be more dominated by onshore flow through September than the gustier, drier offshore winds. That's typically the case during the summer, but I think it's going to be even more accentuated over the next few months compared to normal. That also means that I think we're going to see less dry, gusty wind events coming from the west as well, which is more impactful, I think, to the Tahoe Basin area. I think the jet stream is going to be a little more weaker during the next several months. Let's go forward.
Brent, I am gonna do just a tiny bit of a time check here and let
Yep.
you know we just have a couple more minutes.
Okay. And we'll breeze through these images. So here's the expectations. For July, I'm expecting near to below normal large fire activity or significant fire activity based on all the different conditions that I've kind of already talked about, plus all the green fuels flush with moisture that we have, especially across these mid and upper elevations, which is indicated by this highlighted area. Let's go to August. August is expected to be normal. Now, that means that we will see large fires during that period. That's typical. In fact, large fires peak per these individual zone areas during the month of August. So I would expect it, but I don't expect unusual activity at this time. If we do, it would be up here in the far north and east, where I think in northeast, where I think drought could return. If we go to the next slide. September, it's average again. I think the big take home here is that I think it's going to be more lightning as a concern with extended dry and warm periods than it would be wind events. Let's go forward to the last slide. And then for October, calling average, but I do believe in that I'll probably be introducing some above normals in the coming months, especially due to the robust grass crop that we have in the lower elevations. I do believe that we'll have some offshore wind events start up more prolifically during the month of October, and a lot of the modeling is suggesting some dryness developing more significant than normal dryness in October. So that's 4 months out. And this concludes, well, there's the summary there. I think the big thing is a lot different fire environment story compared to the previous 3 years. It's going to be a late start to the significant part to the fire season, but we're still going to have a fire season. I think it's going to be more of a lightning issue year compared to past years, and the heat and probably some building drought later in the summer. And that ends it.
Thank you so much, Brent. Again, if you have questions that have come up, please type them into the chat and we will address all of the questions at the end. I'm going to invite Bob from CAL FIRE, if you would like to add anything from the CAL FIRE perspective, feel free to jump in now if you would like.
Yeah, thank you. And that was a great presentation from Brent. Not a lot I can add to that. Weather's the same for the Forest Service as it is for CAL FIRE. But I wanted to talk a little bit about our preparedness for the fire season and some of the things we're doing. So I'll start with, we entered peak staffing this past Monday, which for the Truckee Tahoe Basin, that means 2 fire engines at Truckee Station and then 1 over in Carnelian Bay. For the unit as a whole, we have 22 engines staffed across both the east and west slope. For our hand crews, we employ 4 different models of hand crews in the Nevada Yuba Placer unit. The most traditional one is our partnership with California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. And we have 2 crews staffed there Due to declining inmate numbers over the years, we used to staff 5 crews out of Washington Ridge Camp, just down Highway 20 from you guys. And we're down to 2 now and hopefully a 3rd here pretty soon. We also have 2 crews that are with our partnership with the California Conservation Corps out of Christian Valley down Highway 80 a little ways. And then we also have 1 crew in partnership with the California National Guard. And then lastly, our in-house fuels crew that's made up of forestry technicians. Switching over to aircraft, we are fully staffed at Grass Valley Air Attack Base. That includes 1 state air attack plane, 1 federal air attack, as well as our 2 air tankers. We did bring on 2 exclusive use helicopters again for the season. 1 will be housed out of Auburn, Station 10. And the other one you might remember was housed at Truckee last year. It was a big blue Black Hawk helicopter. We've made the decision to move that to Grass Valley Air Attack Base to be housed there for a couple of reasons. One is the abundant moisture in the higher elevations right at the moment, as well as the Forest Service also has a helicopter stationed at Truckee for the season, so we're not leaving it high and dry there. But the helicopter we're moving to Grass Valley will still be the primary helicopter that we'll send into the Truckee Tahoe Basin. And then over on the South Shore, the Amador El Dorado unit of CAL FIRE went into partnership with the Nevada Division of Forestry, and they're housing a helicopter at South Lake Airport this year. So an abundance of air resources available to the Truckee Tahoe region. One new change for this season coming up is historically we've had 1 battalion chief assigned to the Truckee Tahoe Basin, and we found position coding and funding to add a 2nd full-time battalion chief. And I'm excited about this. It'll give us full week coverage with 2 awesome guys that are both full-time Truckee residents, and they're fully invested in their local community, and I'm just excited to have both of them up there. And I've invited one to share a little bit with you here in just a minute. So a couple of other things going on. We've got our Unified Command training coming up on July 19th on the East Slope. This is where we bring all of our fire and law partners together for a day of training. And we do simulated incidents where the fire incident commanders and the sheriff's office gets together and runs a simulated incident, does evacuations, works together at the back of the truck, just to hone those skills, make introductions to each other so we're not meeting each other for the first time on a real incident, and just to knock off those cobwebs before fire season hits and really hone in our skills for that. So that's coming up on July 19th. And lastly, I'm going to pass it off to Battalion Chief Thomas Smith real quick, and he's going to discuss some of our fuel reduction efforts in the basin. Thomas?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much. My name is Thomas Smith. I'm the new field battalion chief in the Truckee Tahoe area that Bob was speaking of, and just wanted to touch on what we have in addition to our emergency response and readiness for the summer. Regarding fire prevention and fuels reduction. On the fire prevention side, you guys will see engines and inspectors out doing defensible space 4291 inspections in the North Tahoe and Truckee areas. As always, we're available to you guys to work with agencies for public education and fire prevention education at events and on a specific basis. And then to lantern some of our fuel reduction projects, we have 2 large ones as it relates to our CAL FIRE personnel working directly on them. And they're both in a cooperative effort with California State Parks. The first one is in the North Tahoe area at the Burton Creek State Park. It's a 1,600-acre landscape level project with fuels production, starting with cutting and piling, pile burning, and eventually broadcast burning. The second project is, excuse me, at the Truckee Donner State Park in the Truckee area, and that is mainly roadside fuels reduction. And then, as Nicole Miller mentioned, we also have a large amount of CAL FIRE grants that have gone out at the county level, at the fire protection district level, and to government agencies, along with private landowners with CFIP, all grant funded, approved through us for you guys to help provide fuels reduction at that level as well. So please reach out to us if you have any questions. I'm excited to be here on the east side and be that resource available to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Again, if you have further questions for our CAL FIRE representatives, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them after Anne's presentation. I'm going to now turn it over to Anne Rarick, the director of the Tahoe Truckee COAD, who's going to tell us a bit more about the COAD and why this is also related to our upcoming wildfire season. So let me share my screen for your presentation and get started.
Great, thanks, Nicole. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me, Community Foundation, and thanks for being such an awesome partner in this project. I am going to talk a little bit about the COAD, and also the COAD is the program of Connecting Point, which is an agency. The headquarters are in Grass Valley, but they serve the Placer, Nevada counties, so the Tahoe Truckee region as well. So I wanted to give a little bit of information about our 211 program. We can go to the next slide. So for those of you not familiar, 211 is our local community call center. It is a 24/7 call line. You can call and text. So we are an information and referral phone line that will link the entire community to different resources that might be needed. We also have bilingual call agents, and we pride ourselves on wait times. So you do actually reach a live person. You can go to the next slide. And kind of, so related to wildfire, 211 has really been getting a lot of experience during disasters, wildfires, and winter weather events, any type of event like that. So we are able to activate and bring on additional call staff to, number one, help folks prepare so we can help people sign up for emergency alerts, point people in the direction of preparedness information. During an event like a wildfire, our call agents have the most up-to-date, timely vetted information from our emergency services office. So they can give you information about what zones are evacuated. If you're confused about where your home or your workplace may be, they can look up that very quickly and kind of tell you, oh, you're in an order or you're in a warning, and really talk through and help folks kind of self-resolve, work out transportation information, where are the shelters, and give other referrals as needed. And then in an event that we do have a widespread wildfire, we do help with the recovery process as well. You can go to the next slide. So wanted to share some information about how 211 assisted during our last round of winter storms in January through March. So we were seeing up to 200 storm-related calls per day, really providing households with the opportunity to speak to a live person when there was stress and anxiety around the storms, and help folks really work through some of the needs that they were having. So we just wanted to share some of the top needs we were seeing throughout the county, and was housing, shelter, information on the disaster, and some assistance with income support. So yeah, just wanted to make sure everybody knew 211 really is going to be the non-emergency line during an event. So you're able to just dial 211 on your phone. You can also dial 833, dial 211. You can also text your zip code to 898-211. Also really encourage folks to check out the website, 211connectingpoint.org. And I was just informed that we're going to have information on the extreme heat that we might see in the next couple of days. a lot of those resources are really geared towards Western County, who's going to see really high temperatures, but where cooling centers, different tips to stay safe during a heat wave, yourself, your families, and your pets as well. And then I'm going to switch gears a little bit here and talk about my role in Connecting Point, which is the manager for our COAD. So the COAD, which stands for Community Organizations Active in Disaster, this is a national model. There's a bunch of different COADs and VOADs throughout the state of California. And we work with emergency services at the county and town level, and with our community-based organizations, nonprofits, businesses, and the faith-based community to really strengthen the disaster planning and the response, making sure we really are looking at the whole community and meeting the needs that we may see on the ground, sharing those with emergency services, and kind of doing all of that information sharing to make sure that everybody is served. You can go to the next slide. So I wanted to give some background on the program. Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation was really the incubator in this program. Early 2020, received a grant to do some consulting work to kind of see what the best model would be in this region. In May 2022, Connecting Point really decided to take on the role of the COAD manager position, in part because they run the 211, and that really close coordination is really helpful. I can share with my coworkers, hey, we're having evacuations here in Tahoe Truckee. They can put that up on the website, make sure all the call agents know, and then when that information changes, we have that really clear line of communication information sharing. So I was hired last September, so we've really been working on this project for almost a year now. And we have quarterly agency meetings with all of our nonprofits, the chambers. A lot of you on this call have been on those calls, so thanks so much for your involvement. And we really want to provide trainings to our agencies, things like organizational preparedness, recognizing a lot of our nonprofits are going to be, the first to respond during a disaster. So how do we make sure that our agencies are really strengthened and able to respond and recover? You can go to the next slide. Wanted to share our mission is to develop and enhance partnerships to create a resilient Tahoe Truckee region that is prepared to respond and recover from disasters. We do this through communication, cooperation, coordination, and collaboration with a variety of stakeholders, including nonprofit and faith-based organizations, government agencies, and the private sector. And wanted to share some examples. We were activated also during the winter storm, got a lot of preparedness materials out to families. We also partnered with the Truckee CERT team, which is the Community Emergency Response Team. And we're helping folks at the sandbag stations in Truckee. We had hot coffee. We were explaining to folks where to put sandbags in their homes for those who were having trouble, physically filling the sandbags. We were there to help them out. That close communication with our county partners and agencies is huge. Able to provide some support for the Emergency Warming Center, and making sure our 211 Winter Resources page was up to date and shared with the rest of the community and our partners. And some other ways that the COAD's been involved. There was a water main burst last fall in Loyalton and Sierra County, and we were kind of called upon to provide some help with bottled water. So the COAD was able to coordinate water donations from Truckee Grocery Outlet. So that's just one example of kind of how the COAD can bridge some of those gaps with both the private sector and our nonprofits. Recently really been working on fire season preparedness. So doing a lot of information about 211, just making sure that that is really out there in the community, and helping folks sign up for emergency alerts and things like that. So really partnering with Sierra Community House to help get the word out, and making sure everybody's prepared. As we heard, had a great winter, but still want to make sure that folks are, looking towards fire season, making sure everybody kind of knows how to be ready for that. And so this is my information. Feel free to reach out. You can shoot me an email, look at us on the internet. But yeah, just really wanted to emphasize the preparedness piece, and we will have very soon 211 will also have their fire season preparedness information out on their website, and they have some really good tips on how you can keep yourself and your family safe. And that's all I have. So I think we can roll into questions.
Thank you so much, Anne. It's really great to have the COAD here in our region now, and we really appreciate you taking the time to give an overview to our community of the role that it's going to play. Hopefully we don't have too many instances where the COAD is, active, but we are very happy to have this organizational structure here in our community now. We have a couple questions that have popped up, but we did also, we did invite just a couple of our agency representatives to make very brief announcements. So I'm going to have, let's see, Cheyenne, if you're on and you want to do your brief announcement about the Lake Tahoe Basin Community Wildfire Protection Plan, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Cheyenne. I am the CWPP program coordinator over at the Tahoe Resource Conservation District, and we are currently in the process of updating our CWPP. It was last updated in 2015, so a lot has happened on the landscape here in the basin. So we had the Caldor fire on the South Shore and a bunch of fuel reduction projects completed, additional fire adapted communities and firewise development and technology. So we're really wanting to move this into a CWPP 2.0, which means it's web-based and it's an easily engaging and updatable platform. So we're also going to be using Land Tender and Vibrant Planet as our project prioritization tools. And also we, for this update, we are working really closely with the community to make sure we're using that engagement and including it in the CWPP update. So we have a basin-wide survey currently happening for those who live in the basin. It's a great way to connect with your fire district and give them your input on the CWPP. So there's a link there, and then also there's the QR code. So if you have any questions, you can reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheyenne. And then we have similarly, Nevada County is also updating theirs. So I will let Alessandra jump in and make a brief announcement about the Nevada County update.
Hi, yeah. So Nevada County is also updating our countywide community wildfire protection plan. It includes all unincorporated and incorporated areas in the county. So it does include Truckee. Our main goal with this plan is to really create a dynamic CWPP update that is going to really reflect the community it's intended to serve. So in order to do that, we have many avenues for participation. We currently have launched our community survey, which will help us establish wildfire risk so that we can prioritize areas for protection based on what our community sees as being the most valuable. It's going to be available online until August 31st. It's in English and in Spanish. You can take it by either scanning the QR code or going to readynevadacounty.org/CWPP. It's open to all Nevada County residents, property owners, workforce, and business owners as well. So you don't have to live in Nevada County full time to take the survey. And we'll also be in-person outreach events such as Truckee Thursdays.
Thank you so much, Alessandra. Finally, I know that we don't have a slide for it, but I believe we had a representative from Truckee Fire that maybe wanted to do a brief announcement about their CWPP update. There's a lot of CWPP updates happening.
Yeah, thank you. I'll jump in really quick. It's Eric Hornvet, Wildfire Prevention Manager at Truckee Fire. So just like other ones you've heard, Truckee Fire is doing a local comprehensive community wildfire protection plan update as well, using kind of some of the best available tools and contractors like Land Tender. And, our goal is to really get some good stakeholder, land manager, agency, and community support, buy-in, and understanding of the project. And, with the goal of creating this wildfire resilience roadmap, so we can create a wildfire resilient Truckee through robust forest management, fuel reduction, outreach and education, and other projects and priorities. So stay tuned. We'll be reaching out to the community as well, tag teaming in with Nevada County and Placer County to make sure we get those surveys, get those feedbacks, and we're going to end up with 4 community meetings in Truckee later this fall. So thank you.
Thanks, Eric. And with that, we are going to jump into questions. We had a couple of questions pop up in the chat. The first one I'm going to turn to from Dave Dupuy was about slash piles in the Truckee area. And I did see that, Thomas, you said that you would wanted to maybe speak to that a little bit, but I will just add that slash piles and their management is going to be specific to who the land management agency is, of where those slash piles are located. So if it's Forest Service, it would be, you know, up to them, and that could vary widely across the different agencies. Thomas, do you want to add anything specifically from CAL FIRE's perspective?
Nicole, that's exactly what I was going to touch on. If the location is known, we can kind of find out who the landowner is, who the project belongs to, and then also, just like everything being fire-wise, making sure that the prescription is right and those people are burning in the right conditions. So everyone's working well. We've had that big winter, and there is a lot of prescribed fire going on, but we have entered the burn ban as of Monday, and so that will likely cease all burning until we come out of that with significant wetting rain later on in the fall. But if you're unsure and you are concerned, feel free. I put my email out, but you can also contact your local fire protection district, and they should at least have some knowledge or intimate knowledge of the projects going on in your fire protection district.
Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. Dave, if you want to email me too, more than welcome to. The only one thing I'll add there is that, you know, having these piles be in the forest after they're created by hand crews for 1 to 3 years is usually to plan. So those piles are usually created, and then they're left on site for typically 1 to 3 years for the material to fully cure out and dry. And then we plan those kind of pile burning operations. But feel free to reach out to myself or Thomas at CAL FIRE, and we're happy to talk one-on-one.
Thank you guys for those responses. There was another question about the COAD I'll go to for Anne, and it was asking for kind of a comparison between COAD and Red Cross in responding to events. And can you give us a little insight into that? I think Red Cross is what people are familiar with. So
absolutely. Yeah, so the COAD's really a coordinating agency. So we work to streamline you know, some of these, the unity of resources and the unity of response. So we work closely with the Red Cross. Red Cross is really going to be the ones that are setting up the shelters, setting up the temporary evacuation points, things like that. So I'm in close communication with our Red Cross representative for our region. And, you know, if they are part of, you know, our COAD network. So the COAD's not the one that's going to actually be setting up the shelter, but we're going to be communicating closely with them. Let's say we need more volunteers. I'm bringing that up to OES, and actually on the volunteer point, if anybody is interested, we are experiencing kind of a lack of trained Red Cross volunteers in our region. So if anyone's really looking to get involved, please reach out to me and I can get you connected with the Red Cross, because we're working on bolstering our volunteer base in the region for those types of things. So we work very closely together.
thanks, Anne. There's another question that just came into the chat about, well, asking if we discussed, but I guess we could just bring this up, but how does the coordination of various agencies and evacuation route planning and chain of command work if /1 fires spread quickly across state lines? I don't know if that's a question that the COAD wants to answer or our agency reps.
And Nicole, I can take a stab at it.
Okay.
Yeah, and like I said in my report out, we're doing our unified command training July 19th. that's really where it starts, is, pre-planning that stuff at the back of the truck in a training environment. Ultimately, the evacuations is the responsibility of the respective law enforcement agency. And we always enter into unified command during these fires. So the fire officer and the law enforcement officer are standing together, making decisions together about evacuation routes, about what areas to evacuate, which ones to put in a warning. And then we're also working on, we just had a meeting today about pre-attack maps that are available to fire and law enforcement personnel that really, pre-identify choke points for traffic, evacuation routes, critical infrastructure, and a lot of those things. So a lot of work's happening on that. You may not see it from the public standpoint, but we're continually working on that, working with our law enforcement agencies to be able to provide the best service we can when the disaster starts.
Thanks, Bob. And I can kind of add to that from, what the COAD would be doing is we are really amplifying the information that we're receiving from the field, from incident command, and making sure that all of our partners are aware, kind of looking out as where the shelters, what are the shelters going to need, things like that. So we're going to leave the evacuation routes to, our emergency management.
Thanks,
But definitely
Anne.
sharing that information. So if
And
there's
Nicole, there was one more, Pamela responded again about evacuation lanes and stuff like that. We do set up with our law enforcement agencies what we call traffic control points. So we'll pick points on highways like 28 where it'll be manned by a law enforcement agency so that fire and law enforcement agencies can get into the emergency and keep people that don't need to be in there out. So traffic control points are set up during unified command with the law enforcement agencies.
Thank you for that. I have a question for Brent on the forecasts. I know you mentioned that the forecasts continually are updated as we progress through the season. Can you tell us when they're updated and where those forecasts are published, when they're released, if people would like to access them and stay up to date as those forecasts change? And then are the forecasts released in a format that are typically digestible for the average person, or are they released more in a format that's designed for agency use?
Well, I'll answer that last question first. They are definitely made for agency use because they're used in preparedness and planning decision making. But we have found, as being a longtime meteorologist, that it's really good to create the information in a digestible way. So I suspect if the agency folks, the big time decision makers that are making the $1 million+ decisions understand it, I'm going to assume that a lot of folks, just regular folks per se, would understand it too. So I try to write the reports up to make it fairly understandable, but it does have some jargon that would be more familiar with agency people. There are two places that you could find this. I did mention on our website, so if you do a Google search for NorthOps weather or ONCC weather at the Coordination Center, you will find a link for the Northern Operations Coordination Center, and there'll be a weather on the left-hand weather tab on the left-hand side. When you click on that, you will find that seasonal outlook that I package up in a PDF and post. The other place that you can find it is if you look up NICC, or the National Interagency Coordination Center. They also post a write-up with maps across the entire country in terms of above or below normal or normal. And so you'll find a write-up for Northern California there as well. But the PDF that I post on the 1st of each month, which is coming up real soon, will be found on our website.
Great, thank you. And first, just want to give a big thank you to all of our speakers. We really appreciate your time. We couldn't do these events without the participation of our partners and experts that engage in these events and present at these events for us and provide these opportunities to the community. So thank you all so much for participating and sharing the forecast, the CAL FIRE perspective, and the information on the COAD. It was really greatly appreciated. We just wanted to show you all this slide for what's coming up next from the Community Foundation with these Forest Futures salons. In August, we have not set a date yet, but in the month of August, we are going to do one of these salons on what is a community wildfire protection plan. We had the 3 agency announcements at the end there that are all happening at the same time. And so we feel like this is a very timely topic to address because they are all happening right now. And there are ways for community members to engage in these community wildfire protection plan updates. And then in September, we will have a salon on woody biomass utilization opportunities and local projects. So there are a number of biomass facilities that are being planned and scoped out right now in the North Tahoe Truckee region. And so we will have a presentation on what some of those local facilities and plans are. And then we also want you to know that previous event recordings are always available on our YouTube channel as well as our website. This presentation will be available on our website and will be emailed out to all of you. And I did see somebody just raise their hand, I believe, John. If you had a question that you didn't get a chance to answer, please feel free before we close here.
I was just wondering, Brent, if you had any predictions on the wind for the summer.
Yeah, yeah. There's a few predictions on the wind. One is that I'm not expecting as many significant dry, gusty wind events, whether it's offshore or onshore for this summer. And that's partly due to a split jet stream flow or a weaker jet that impacts the West Coast. So that's kind of the main theme. I think it's going to be more dominated by onshore flow, which is typically a little cooler and more moist for some of those coastal areas, which certainly helps them.
Thank you,
Thank
Brent.
you.
All right, and with that, I think we are going to end this event. Thank you all for your participation. We will email out the recording to everyone who is registered to attend this event, as well as a feedback survey will be sent out. So thank you all so much for attending, and we hope you have a wonderful evening.